This is Janet O'Keefe, the SEN Revolution host. And welcome to you if you're listening into this show. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. I thought that it would be a really great thing for me to share a little bit of my story today and to share with you my vision and what it is that I'm hoping to do over the next few weeks, which is really exciting, and I'd like you to invite you to join with me and take part in. So if I set the scene a little bit, so I've already told you my name is Janet O'Keefe. Professionally, I'm a speech and language therapist. I grew up in London and went to somewhere called the Central School of Speech and Drama, where I trained alongside the acting and stage directing students, as well as the drama students, because Central is most known for its drama teaching. And at the time that I qualified, they also did a speech therapy degree, and it was an honours degree with a huge amount of psychology involved. And I think the sorts of students that Central turned out were those students who were incredibly practical and who had a really fabulous rapport with their clients. So this was my background when I entered my first jobs in the National Health Service here in the UK, and I was really fortunate to get a job in a local authority with an amazing mentor leader, and she encouraged me to work with both children and adults, which is quite unusual. And so I had a really fabulous grounding in that local authority to work with children with all sorts of difficulties, but particularly at that point with children with hearing impairment or deafness. But I also worked with adults who'd had some sort of neurological issue, so it might have been a stroke or a degenerative condition or a head injury. And during that 4 years where I was working with Liz Clark in Bexley, I met my husband and we moved to East Anglia. I very quickly became the chief speech and language therapist for what was then called the Mid Anglia NHS Trust, based at a brand new child development centre in Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk. And so for 8 years, I managed and coordinated the services to all children across West Suffolk, and indeed to children and adults with learning disability. And it was there, working with the paediatricians, that I developed a particular special interest in autism. And all young people who are diagnosed with somewhere on the spectrum. And I was part of the team that made that diagnosis for those children, particularly those who were in mainstream and who appeared to have developed relatively normally, but were struggling once they got into school, particularly on the social side of things. And it was interesting for me that initially it was both deafness and autism that were my sort of focus of my therapeutic work, because one of the main reasons that I'd become a speech and language therapist in the first place was because one of my uncles was born deaf. He had relatively good speech for the degree of hearing loss that he had, but he felt, and I noticed growing up, that he was often treated differently by people in society, and people made assumptions about him because although his speech was quite good, it wasn't always clear and didn't always articulate every single sound. And that was the main reason that I wanted to be a speech and language therapist, was because I wanted to not only help people who had communication issues, but also to actually change those attitudes. And what seemed to happen, as far as I was concerned, when I was working in the National Health Service, was that the decision making was increasingly made by accountants and those people that held the purse strings and had the resources, and they would start telling the therapists who they could see, how long they could see them for, and all of those sorts of decisions that were previously made on from a professional basis, that had no relationship at all to the needs of that young person or indeed adult. And so I became increasingly frustrated with really running around putting sticking plasters on things and not doing my job properly, and not making the difference in people's lives that I knew that I could make if I was able to give people more time. And so I discovered neuro-linguistic programming as part of my own personal development. And I learnt more in my first 5-day course than I had in the previous 5 years, not only about my own learning and thinking styles, but actually about the range of learning and thinking styles in the population at large. And that learning, although deemed personal development by the Human Resources Department at the trust that I worked at, was really so beneficial and so directly relatable to my communication, not just with the children that I worked with, but also with my colleagues, with parents, with teachers, in every geographical location that I worked in. And so I decided, by the time I had finished that first 5-day course, that I would carry on and do my master practitioner training. And by the end of that master practitioner training, I'd handed in my notice and become an independent speech and language therapist. Little did I know, though, at that point, sort of what my future was going to be and my trajectory was going to be. So my first goal was to build a clinic building in the garden of my house, and to see if I could get enough clients to come and see me to keep me gainfully and happily occupied. But I really didn't know whether that would be the case or not, because independent practice in the UK was still relatively new. But luckily for me, in some ways, there was more than enough work out there and available, so that I was able to build up quite quickly to seeing people on a regular basis. And I was relatively quickly invited to do second opinion assessments and reports for children with a wide range of special educational needs that could be used when parents went to the local authority and asked for a statutory assessment, and indeed a statement of special educational needs, in order to get provision in place. Now, what often happened when parents asked the local authority for extra support was that they ended up going to an appeal tribunal at the Special Educational Needs and Disability Tribunal. And I would go with them to give live expert evidence, and the solicitors and barristers and support groups that represented parents in that tribunal forum then started referring other families to me for a similar service. So, within a really short space of coming into independent practice, I was learning much more about the law of the land and how special educational needs had evolved in the UK, and how the legal situation impacted both on families and on the professionals working to support them in schools and indeed in the NHS. So I was, fast forward now until 2003, and my we had an extended family situation whereby a baby was born with only half a heart. By this time, we had 3 sons of our own, and we had my mum living with us. And so we felt that we were in a position where we would put ourselves forward to initially foster this baby, but in the fullness of time, we became special guardians and then adopted him. So we now have 4 children. Over the course of our youngest child's development, it became clear that his heart condition was not his only issue, and that there were likely to be other developmental issues that were relevant to him. And it was likely that some of them might be to do with his development, the fact that he had lots of heart surgery and heart investigations under anaesthetic, and was on medication literally from the time he was born. Or it could be genetic, or a combination of the two. But we were fairly sure that he was going to have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But until he'd had his final open heart surgery, which happened when he was 6, so that would have been in 2009, the local CAMS service wouldn't diagnose ADHD. But as soon as they realised that with improved oxygen saturations, his attention actually got worse rather than better, we got the diagnosis fairly quickly. But heart medication and ADHD medication do not go well together, and all ADHD medication affects the heart. And therefore we, with respect, didn't want our local services to be compromising this little boy's health that we had nurtured so lovingly, and all that we had been through with his 14 operations. And therefore we asked for a referral to a specialist centre, and very fortunately we are under the Maudsley Hospital down in London, who have been amazing. And so, having initially got the ADHD diagnosis, they then set about doing a really thorough assessment of him and us as a family over the next few months, and diagnosed autism for him as well. Now, in his educational career, our lad had needed extra help when he first went into school, but at that time we were literally only foster carers. I say only foster carers because in many ways social care do not give foster carers the information and support that they might need in order to become the in loco parentis or corporate parent on behalf of the local authority. There is also a conflict in that foster carers are paid by the local authority, albeit via an agency, and education and special education is provided by the same local authority, albeit by a different department, but often the heads of those services share an office and stare at each other across a desk. So everybody has budgets, and everybody has the economic crisis at the forefront of their minds, and this was going to be a very expensive child. So even right from the word go, even though they know me very well, they knew that I knew people who could help support me to go to appeal and all of those sorts of things, we still had to jump through the same hoops that any parent with a child with special educational needs, or indeed special needs of any sort, have to jump through. So we had to engage specialist solicitors, both family law and education law, and we had to go to both the High Court to get a protective order to stop social care taking him away while we sorted out his education and support. We then had to put an appeal in place to go to tribunal. Now, at the end of that particular process, we didn't go to tribunal because the local authority did settle, but literally a week before the hearing. We then monitored his progress, and although he did make some progress, academically he was falling further and further behind. We changed him to a different primary school where we thought there was more special needs experience, and he had a full-time teaching assistant, but he was still having lots of difficulty, particularly focusing and particularly with his behaviour. So before he got his autism diagnosis, the only option appeared to be to initially get additional help for him in school, and particularly mental health support. And this time we did have to go all the way to tribunal, and the local authority were represented by very aggressive solicitors. We fortunately did win, but it just was exactly the same stressful, emotionally draining experience that all parents with children with special educational needs go through if they go through an appeal. And, you know, I've been supporting parents as a professional for several years by this stage, but I hadn't obviously been as a parent in that situation. So not only have I got objective empathy for parents, I actually have walked the walk as well, and you know absolutely that even though I have lots of knowledge, that I needed to have a legal person sitting next to me so that they were able to sit between me and this aggressive solicitor, and they were able to put my case in an objective way without it being coloured by my anger or upset when people were talking about my child with you know, without knowledge or even having seen him. So he then still didn't progress even with the extra support and the mental health support, and so we realised that he did. And the only school that was available for a child with his medical condition and ADHD was a school for children with social, emotional and behavioural difficulties. So we chose a particular school that was manageable in terms of travelling, and he went there for 5 terms. In it, well, it was 5 terms technically, but actually he only attended for 4 terms because the first 2 terms were excellent. There was then a change of head teacher, a change of owner of the school, and a change of organisation within the school, which meant that he on one particular day ended up changing class teacher, classroom and peer group all on one day, and he just became so anxious that we had to remove him, and he actually was out of school then for a couple of months, which were his last few months at that school. In the intervening period, we had his diagnosis of autism. We had started on his ADHD anti-anxiety medication, and he had really begun to be able to focus much more and to be able to learn and process more. And so we knew that once we had an autism diagnosis, that we suddenly had 2 things. We had a community that we could ourselves link into, but we also had a lot more educational options and opportunities available to us for looking at autism specialist education. Now, I knew from my work supporting other parents that specialist autism provision is incredibly variable, and it's provided by a variety of different peoples in terms of they might be state-funded schools, they may be independent schools, they may be run by a big group, or they may be individually owned or part of a charity. But I'd been working in a particular school for a couple of years, providing speech and language therapy initially via subcontracting, and then myself personally. I knew that this particular school had a head teacher who was incredibly supportive and really listened. And you know, she was developing a team, and it was an academy and free school, which we thought at that time, the head teacher and I, meant that she would have more autonomy over the type of provision and class sizes and all of those sorts of things. And so that's where our youngest child now still is. And, you know, there are more pros than cons going on in school, but I'm really disappointed to say that actually their funding has been cut by at least 8% this term, and the head teacher's choice was to remove therapy or to lose a teacher and make the class sizes bigger. And so right at this precise moment in time, there is no therapy contract at that particular school. And the class sizes have increased anyway. The local authorities that place children there really don't care about the quality. They're just wanting to get bottoms on seats and to provide the education as cheaply as possible. And you know, yet again, that's another lesson and evidence for me of the need that there is for more support for both parents, teachers and therapists out there who work with children with needs. In 2011, I was asked to write a book. I was approached by a particular publisher who'd been going around to various conferences, professional conferences, and asking people what they wanted a book on and who they thought should write it. And I was very honoured to have been named as the person that other therapists, other colleagues, wanted to write a book about the statement process from a therapist's perspective, and they wanted me to write it from a therapist's perspective, knowing that I was also a parent, and indeed an adoptive parent, so had actually been through the mill from a health, education and social care perspective, both on a personal level as well as on a professional level. And so my first book was launched, and we decided to put on a one-day conference event to launch that book back in 2011. And the conference was so well received that we decided at that point to make it an annual event. But really, I've been sort of doing that and yes, providing that to the clients that have been contracting with me over that period of time, almost as a gift and almost just to share the information that I'd learned through my experiences. It followed the same format as the book, which, you know, because I had been arrogant in thinking that I knew everything, and I still certainly don't know everything, and that it's also much more useful to work with other colleagues to actually get everybody's perspective. And to look for the range of perspective as well, so that we look for people who've been through the system but have had a really good outcome and what then happened. And I think that so the format of the book was in three parts. The first section was an update on the history of special educational needs, and particularly the history of the appeal system and the process, the appeal process, and what that actually entailed. The middle part of the original book was 15 stories of families who'd actually been through the system and what happened to their young people once they got the support into whichever school they had been successful in getting a placement. And then the final bit of the book was focusing on the 10 things that parents had told me through these stories had made the most positive difference to them and their families, to the young people themselves in terms of their progress and attainment, but more importantly to their well-being and that well-being of the family as well as just the child individually. And so, my view was then and still is now that if we focus on those 10 things, then regardless of the legal situation, the political situation, or the resource situation, the economic situation, that we will make a positive difference to those young people that we come into contact with. And so the very final chapter was very much a call to action to anybody who read the book to tell me what they could do, and to challenge themselves as to what they could do that would actually make a positive difference to these young people. And then say, coming right up to date and why I'm on the show today, with the lovely Marina, was to say, actually, although this had been a really fantastic project, it wasn't reaching enough people to really make a difference in society, because although we can make a difference in individual lives and we can do it, one family at a time, that's fine. Actually, if we're going to get real change that will impact all those young people with special educational needs, then we need to change attitudes, we need to change the culture, we need to change society. And the way to do that is you can influence it from the bottom up, which is what we've been doing, but actually you need to get to the top. You need to actually influence the system from the top down, and tribunals do that to a certain extent, but legal aid has been reduced for families with children. There are now only 2 legal firms in the whole of the country that can actually provide legal help to families in education matters. And the system has got even more bureaucratic with the special educational needs and disability reforms that have happened in the last Parliament. And even though they were designed to make the system better and fairer and all of those things, the reality is it's just got more bureaucratic. So I knew from the presenters who had both contributed to the original book but also had contributed each year to presenting at my conferences that we needed to update the book. And so I became involved with a Canadian publisher who challenged me to write a book that was as brief as possible, but also had all the same nuggets that were in the original book, but actually expanded on it. So not only bring it up to date legally as to what all the reforms mean to parents, but what are the practical things that parents can do, and what were the key themes that kept coming up. And so that's where I am today, Marina. I've republished my book. It's now available both on Amazon and on my website. We've decided to not just do one event a year, but to actually do 6 events over this sort of 18-month period, and to take them around the country in the UK. So we've got an event coming up on the 17th of November in Manchester. We're going to Reading in March in 2017, back to London in June 2017, and then hopefully Birmingham, although we still need a venue for that, for September 2017, and then back to Manchester in November 2017. Because we just feel that we want to reach more and more people with these pieces of information that can really make a huge difference. And I think that over the process of rewriting this second book, it's become more and more evident to me that I need to connect with more people, and that the way to do it is via the media, and the way to do it is via both social media and radio media, and personal discussion. And so, I approached you, Marina, to see whether we could put together some interviews. And I'm absolutely delighted to say that we're going to be recording this at the end of October, so that we've got 4 fabulous legal speakers lined up who are either specialist education law solicitors or barristers, or indeed representatives of charities or support groups that work with parents of children with special educational needs when they are going to appeal, or indeed mediation, or indeed court, if that is the route that they need to go down. I'm thinking particularly now of our children with head injuries or birth injuries. We've got 4 families who are more than happy to share their stories and their process on the summit, and to also have some specialist therapists and teachers and schools, head teachers, who can share what they know works, to share examples of excellence, so to share what they do in their school, what they do in their particular therapy, that parents and teachers and therapists can learn one golden nugget that they can immediately implement, and if they implement, will make a positive difference to their situation immediately. And we hope that by making this summit of 20 interviews that about 20 minutes each, freely available to anybody that it will interest, not just in the UK but globally, that if the listeners don't do anything else but listen to these recordings and implement some of these strategies, we will reach more people and we will make that positive difference. But on the back of that, we are wanting to create an online global community. So both the summit and the global community, and indeed our one-day events that we're organising, are coming under the heading of the SEN Revolution, and that's obviously the title of this radio show too. And it's not just about the fact that sometimes parents need to fight for the needs of their child and the rights of their child, but it's about turning special educational needs on its head, because we can't change the behaviour and the thoughts of others until we've actually empowered ourselves. So the thoughts around the membership community is around bringing people together, parents and professionals together, and there will be one piece of content provided via webinar or video or audio every single week that will have a rhythm about it, so that people will get to know what we're talking about each week of the month. So in the first week of every month, we will be talking about emotional well-being and resilience. And we'll be talking about strategies that parents, teachers and therapists can employ themselves to help themselves to feel happier, more nourished and powerful. So that when they take on talking to other people about the needs of their child and getting those support systems in place, they do it from a place of power. They do it from a place where they are not feeling bullied or in any way patronised or discriminated against. Because you need to be in that place, that emotional resilient place, to be able to take this on. And then the second week is all about physical health and well-being, and the things that we can add into our lives, both for ourselves and for our children, that will actually help us to be, as fit and healthy as we possibly can be. And then the third week of every month, we'll be talking to those specialists and those teachers who can give us those golden nuggets. So some of the people that are talking on the summit we'll invite to talk for an hour, for between half an hour and an hour on the third week of every month, so that they can tell us in more detail and use slides and video and things like that to actually demonstrate some of these fabulous therapies and techniques that unfortunately the statutory services won't necessarily tell parents about. And they won't tell them how they can get funding for them. They won't tell them where they can get hold of information about them. So, this is all about, sharing this information. Every month will be our legal colleagues. So we'll be, talking about, power of attorney and deputyship, as well as about tribunals and court hearings and those sorts of things. So, I know that there's so much happening in the world of SEN, and we will also have some question and answer sessions if there is a 5-week month, or indeed through a Facebook type forum, so that, if people join our community, those of us in the community can actually give each other both peer support, but also professional support. And all the videos from all the presentations that we've ever had at the conference, and all the recordings of the summit and the weekly content will all be inside the membership site that our members will be able to access anytime that they so need it. So I'm just really excited at having this opportunity to share this information with you, and to, ask you as an initial action, if you can just share with anybody and everybody that you know that we are doing and recording this free summit at the end of October, in order that we can, get as many people as possible signing up to listen to all these recordings, just so that we can give them that support. So, over to you, Marina, at this point, as to whether you have any questions.
Wow, Janet, you are a woman with a gracious. And I don't know what word would be for somebody who is so passionate about putting the right. You see, many people find their passion into delivering the good into the place. But what you are doing is very different. You are making room in the world you already have for the people who, for no reason, are and I can't even to understand what is in your heart. You are a parent, you are an educator, you are the authority in the field, and you experience so many situations where life wasn't fair. And you decided that enough is enough. Not going to wait for anyone to put the wrong right. I'm going to create the right tools to empower the people who are affected by the lack of information, by the lack of communication, by the lack of love for the people I represent. And you took this dream and you turned it into a vision. And not only that, you wrote the second book, and I'm so grateful you accepted to launch your book at the autumn ceremony in December at BAFTA. But you took it further.
Yeah, absolutely.
You opened that door into your own heart that nobody could ever close again. So you took it to heart.
And I think what it is that I know how special these young people are, and I know how much they have to give the world, and how much they are here to teach us, and that the more that the system grinds us down, whether we be parents or professionals. I mean, from a speech and language therapy point of view, it just completely as you say, hurts to such an extent when the powers that hold the purse strings cut therapy, cut services, cut schools, without any thought to what that is going to mean to that young person's future and their ability to reach that potential, whatever that might be. And we're beginning a tiny bit to see some people with some disabilities actually becoming more visible and showing the world how much talent they have. In America, Niall DeMarco won the Dancing with the Stars, which is a very big popular TV show. And he is completely deaf, was born completely deaf. He can't even wear hearing aids because hearing aids wouldn't make any difference. So all his communication is using a sign interpreter. He couldn't hear the music. He couldn't even hear the vibrations. He had to dance totally by feeling. He had to dance by watching and learning from his partner. And yet he was able not only do that beautifully, but to do it well enough that he actually won the whole show. And he's not then gone away and thought, aren't I amazing? I'm America's top model, and I'm also this great dancing person. But he's actually gone on to launch a foundation to educate the population about deafness, about sign language, and about integration and inclusion, so that more and more young people who have that type of disadvantage can make it into not only university, if that's appropriate for them, but into public life and appropriate places. I have many other examples of some amazing people that I've met, who again have either by birth or by accident got a really major disability that people would look at and think, they don't have a life, they just need to choose their wheelchair or whatever they might need. And yet, these people have shown that with the right support, the right understanding, the right resources, they can not only live a basic life, but they can live an amazing and inspiring life, and a life that can inspire those of us who, may think that we are able. And the title of my recent book is called The Ordinariness of Impairment, and that was chosen deliberately because none of us are perfect, but we are all imperfectly perfect. And that's basically because we all have things we're good at. We all have we're not so good at. But those people who haven't got a label and aren't in a special school or specialist environment, we focus on strengths rather than on needs or disabilities. And if everybody treated all of us just by focusing on our difficulties, we'd get really miserable really quickly. And yet that is often what people do to young people who have a particular need. From a speech and language point of view, for example, a lot of therapists work out what it is that a child can't do and then focuses their therapy on exactly what the child can't do. Now, I can't wire plugs very well. And if I was ever asked to, if a teacher had identified this and thought, Janet can't wire plugs, let's make her wire plugs every day and see if she gets better, the chances are I might have got better by doing that, but I would hate that activity. And when I'd finished and was allowed to stop, I'd throw them across the room and never want to look at another one again. Whereas, if they said, actually, Janet is fantastic at colouring and is really artistic. So actually, rather than getting her to wire plugs, we'll just explore the colours of the different wires and, how they relate to something else that Janet might be interested in nature or whatever. And then gradually move towards getting me to colour in pictures of plugs and where the wires go and get them the right colours and that kind of thing. And then gradually moving to the practicalities of it. Then actually I might enjoy it a bit more. I might learn it a bit more, but more importantly, I might then use that skill in everyday life and actually be able to use it functionally when I've, had left school. And I think that that's why, say, I've called it the SEN revolution. I want to get everything turned on its head so that we actually put the young person first and we meet them where they are, and that we include everybody who's involved in that person's life in planning for that young person, including the young person themselves and including the parents, and actually have them as equal partners. Because I think there's a bit of lip service going on at the moment whereby, the tick box says you have to have meetings and you have to include the parents and you have to include the child. But actually what happens is the local authority or the school come along and they've already filled the form in. They're including those people, but actually they're not really listening. They're not really including those persons' views. And they're certainly not finding ways and solutions, particularly around communication, to enable people to fully participate in a meaningful way. And so I think that although, there may be some baby steps towards, in the right direction, there really does have to be, a complete change of the way that all of us do things. And, even though, I've already said I'm a parent and a professional, I'm not perfect either. And every speaker that I speak to, every parent that I speak to, every young person that I work with teaches me something new. adds to my knowledge, to the point where I can then share that with other people, and I go into every situation. You know, I know, Marina, that I go to Romania a couple of times a year and work with families there, because the availability of services is so much less. And none of us know what we don't know. And so, you know, the people that I work with, the community that I work with, are just so grateful for being for having people pointing them in the right direction, sharing equipment with them, sharing good practice with them, because they are really fearful for the future of their young people and what might happen when their children might live them. And so, you know, the big focus for them at the moment is you know, actually, you know, we need to not stop when, you know, thinking about, yes, this is all about special educational needs, i.e., you know, until somebody leaves education. But actually, you know, my commitment to these families is lifelong. My commitment to my son is lifelong. And therefore, we need to look at the transition to adult services too. And we also need to look at, you know, what society and charities and individuals can provide that will enable people to continue to have that supported living as an adult as well, possibly beyond the lifetime of their parents. So, you know, this is a huge mission. So you're absolutely right. You know, it is absolutely in my heart. But actually, this is a huge mission about how we value the most vulnerable in our society. And, you know, I think that maybe, you know, we need to go a lot further than we have so far in order to be able to really take our own evolution to the next level, really.
Wow, Janet. And in terms of our listeners who now understand, you really need their help. You really need each and everyone help to support this amazing mission and make it happen and make that change in our society. Because nothing happens outside our knowledge, and what's more expected than ignorance. So in effect, you want our listeners to start by buying your book, reading in, and listening to their own heart. What they feel they could do right now to your hand, what they feel they could do right now for you to be able to reach out, because our children are everywhere. Our children are in Africa, in North America, in Europe, in London, in Romania, everywhere. We are not talking about hundreds of individuals. We are talking about a massive part of our population that is affected by the lack of from the rest of our society. And what we want to help everybody understand how important it is for us not to ignore. It's not something we can put in a drawer and wait for somebody to open the door. It's happening in everyday life. And all this amazing talent, which is unknown right now, all those voices which are unheard right now, they have to be welcome in our society, in our schools, on our stages. And we have to be proud of that.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, Marina, I really want every single person in the world and their families to know that they're not alone, to know that they are supported, to know that they are loved, and that there are people in the world who can provide them with that support and that information and those strategies that they can start to employ. This isn't about me telling people what to do. This isn't about me saying, you know, I know what, you know, the best looks like and this is what you need to strive for. This is about reaching out to people where they individually are and saying, you know, you need, if you want to look for the SEN revolution online, or particularly on Facebook, you can follow the page where all the information about any of the radio shows, the books, that kind of information, the links to the various websites about the events. And the events are all recorded too, video recorded, so that wherever you are in the world, providing you have internet access, you can see the presentations that we put together, you can listen to the shows that we put together. The book is available on Amazon. So I would just say to people to reach out. There are free things too on each of the websites. As I say, the summit is free. I have a free PDF guide for families in the UK who are going through any part of the statutory process for their children, with lots of support group information in terms of contact information about where they can go to get, you know, to get support. And there is also my presentation, my video presentation of the story that you've heard this afternoon, but with obviously different aspects and different details in there. So, you know, and as time passes, if we can build a big enough community who can all contribute to this, then we can really develop those services and those products and those activities and all of those sorts of things. And we can, you know, hopefully over time make more and more of it freely available to our listeners.
Wow. So next for our listeners is to connect with you. What is the best place where they could find you or they could connect with you?
I think probably Facebook, actually, to actually go to the SEN Revolution page and to like the page. Worry always with Facebook in terms of personal pages. I've got spare capacity at the moment, but that won't last for long before you get to the limit of your friendships. You know, sort of allowance, as it were. The SEN Revolution page is where all the information is posted, and all the links are for them to find the other information that we've been talking about today.
We were thinking how we could overcome that limitation, and right now, as we speak, on page on Radio W.O.R.K.S World, which works exactly like Facebook, but is better. There are no limits how many people can connect with you. People could comment, they could engage, they could listen to your shows, they could download the videos and all the informational tools you provide our listeners with, and we are going to publish your page. In terms of what our listeners could gain from engaging with you, what do you think is the message for today?
That there is always hope. There is always hope. And that I think that many of us get bogged down with what the issues are, the problems are, the difficulties. And it's really difficult sometimes to see the way forward for finding positive solutions. And many of the forums that I see, particularly on the charity websites or indeed again Facebook groups, I can see that a lot of people go on there just to offload, and although that's valuable in some senses, actually there are you know, people then might just go into a downward spiral. And so I think that you know, my feeling always is to try to look for a positive solution and to look for it as quickly as possible, but to do things one step at a time, one change at a time. So I can't give you off the top of my head one thing that you know, we'll be doing that will make the most difference. I say there will be things to do with health and nutrition. There will be things to do with getting enough sleep. There'll be things to do with, you know, drinking enough water. There will be things to do with, you know, what useful thinking patterns and strategies, you know, you can employ in a daily routine that will actually help you to feel happier and more able to then action any of the therapies and strategies, or indeed legal processes that you need to.
Wow. Thank you so much, Janet, for sharing from the heart, showing that side of things that people don't have access to it. And I'm sure that's the beginning of a great journey. And I'm very humbled for being part of the journey. And I can't wait for your next when different raised and more questions answered. So both of us until next time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Bye-bye.